Every single class is the main character of MapleStory. They got decent mobbing, their bossing is really good, they have some of the best mobility out of any other class in the game, and nowadays are fairly easy to get to 6th job with through just doing dailies in Monster Park. Even faster if you have hyperburning. Some classes are more favored than others, there's some that are really lazy at pretty much everything they do, and some others that are just absolute strugglers the moment they come out the gate swinging. Thankfully, there's a pretty typical line of sorts all of them follow, and aside from class-specific things like combos or certain setups for bossing and such, they all have a bunch of overlap and similarities with a lot of things. So let's get into it, starting with all their skills. Skills are probably going to be the most varied per job rank, but let's go through what the general flow will be like. Here at beginner skills, usually some passives you'd obtain from class-specific quests, extra things like Maple Alliance's passive around level 70 once you do that little quest line, a home teleport of some sort for, I think, nearly every class now, and then finally, your Link skill. Every class has one, they typically go up to level 2, which unlocks at level 120, and some classes are special, going up to a level 3 Link at level 210. Some are better than others, and all the Explorer class links stack per class type, same as the Cygnus Knights with, well, all Cygnus Knights, except Mihail. He has his own separate Link skill. First job is where everyone typically gets some basic passives for smaller stats, like movement or class main stat, and sometimes some attack. You also typically get your movement skill here, which for pretty much everyone is a flash jump. Thieves get one they can use twice in the air, and most of these flash jumps also have an up jump tacked onto them as well. If you're a mage class, you get a teleporting skill that you can use in any cardinal direction, even in the air and sometimes also on ropes and ladders. The mages that don't get teleport are like Lara, Lyn, Kinesis, and Blaze Wizard, who all instead get flash jumps for their movement. I don't know why. Some classes get additional movement skills like Ho-Young, Ilium, and Kali, but those are typically some kind of dash, float, glide, things like that. Lastly, everyone also gets some kind of basic mobbing skill that gets replaced per every new job rank. Some classes end up using all of their job rank skills throughout every level of their journey, while others just toss that skill out the window the very first instance they can. Second job supplies more basic stat boosting passives, sometimes more final damage, maybe some attack speed either in the form of a passive or a buff, sometimes a toggle or two for extra passive damage or enhanced movement, etc. And sometimes some more damage boosting buffs that sometimes count towards the whole party. Oh, and also a new mobbing skill or two. Sometimes some kind of utility skill that either shoves enemies back or pulls them in, knocks them into the air, or whatever else. Third job is more of the same as second in most cases. More passives, occasionally a new toggle or buff, new attacks, and I think here is where some classes start to get their bossing skills. If it's not at 3rd or some other previous job rank, it'll typically be at 4th. Pretty much everybody gets their main bossing and mobbing skills either at 4th job or by 4th job. And 4th job, Maple Warrior and Heroes will. What, you expected me to say more? Hyper skills usually consist of typically 2 buffs and 1 skill of some kind. One across many classes like Explorers, Cygnus Knights, Flora, and Heroes, all being some kind of variant of Epic Adventure. It changes names depending on the character type you're playing. 10% damage for you and all other shared character types that are in your party, 1 minute uptime, 2 minute cooldown. For the other buffs, usually one that gives you bonus stats for a set period of time, some others give you buffs that double the amount of lines you do, some charge up certain classes' gauges or gives them an extra transformation, etc. Lastly, the combat skill. This varies a ton, and it's usually either some kind of iframe, some kind of bind, sometimes maybe another damage increasing buff, or even sometimes just an extra attack with a typically fairly short cooldown, like Bowmaster's Gritty Gust. Hyper passives fluctuate a ton in between all the individual classes too, but generally boosting your main class's skills that you'll be spamming often is the safest pick. This ranges from extra damage, extra Vota. This ranges from extra damage, extra boss damage, sometimes an extra line of damage, bonus IED either on one specific attack or across multiple different attacks, extra duration on certain summons, decreased attack intervals, all kinds of stuff. I simply just can't cover everything here, otherwise this video would be like 3 hours long, and I don't want to do that. Just use what you feel would be best until either I make a video on a class, or you check up elsewhere online as to what hyper passives are optimal for your class at the current moment, or just test stuff around and see what works best for you. Oh, and you'll usually want to avoid putting any points into the extra mobs hit passives, unless you're a grinding fiend that benefits stupidly well from it. Typically, your mobbing focused skills are more than enough while grinding, and it's most of the time just a wasted point. I want to add in another thing that I don't think I've ever talked about yet, that some people request me to cover sometimes. Hyperstats. I don't usually cover these because they're pretty much identical across all classes, but hey, I still cover link skills even with that stipulation, so yeah, why not go over them here? First, a grinding setup. Pre-200, you'll want to just balance out damage and normal damage to increase your damage on enemies per map you fight. You could push them each up to level 10, but 7 or 8 is usually good enough, because then you can use those extra points into other stats, namely attack and XP obtained. XP isn't super duper important until you're grinding at 5th job and higher, but it is still an increase if you wanted it. If you wanted to focus more on one-shotting mobs, focus more on the attack stat for now. The main stat options are fairly good overall for tossing a couple points into, like anywhere from 1 to 4, but keep in mind they don't scale with your percent stat lines you may have on your equips. Once you reach level 200 and unlock your first arcane symbol, you could reset your points and dump a bunch into arcane power. I personally like doing this, especially for alts, because it's always useful all the way up to 260 to have as much arcane while grinding as you can possibly get. While we're on the topic of arcane power, not only do you do bonus damage on enemies up to 1.5 times their map's arcane power level, including bosses throughout the Arcane River, but you also take less damage the more arcane power you have relative to their map's level. So the more you have, the more you'll just only be taking 1 whole damage every time they hit you. Unless it's a pesky AFK mob, those ignore everything and come right for your soul. 260 onward, you could swap out the arcane power for whichever stats you want, but generally around this point, you'll probably want to have at least XP obtained maxed out to level 15, which gives 10% bonus XP, and then the remainder points shoved into damage and normal damage, and whatever else you feel like. At higher levels, you want to get as much XP from any sources you can. Now let's cover a bossing setup for hyperstats. It doesn't matter what level you're at for this one, these stats will apply across the board. You'll want to start off by balancing damage and boss damage, while maybe including some IED if you so needed it. Generally, you'd want to aim for 90% or higher, but 90% IED is pretty good across the board all the way up to about like Lucid and Will, Normal Tenebris, around there-ish. Moving on, reaching the crit rate cap of 100% is fairly important, but typically you can reach it fairly easily nowadays through links, Legion, decent sharp eyes at 5th job, and Legion artifacts. If you still needed more, you could pour a few points into the hyperstat, but most classes don't need to. If you're an archer, you'll want to go over the 100% cap to deal more damage with Vicious Shot. Once you do reach the 100% cap, it's worth investing into crit damage. Pretty strong stat all around. Some flat attack is good too if you have leftover points, same as a couple points into main stat, but focus on damage and boss damage above all else if you can. Lastly, very few classes have a special stat that isn't mana, namely Demon Slayer, Zero, Kinesis, and Kana. Putting some points into this stat usually gives you more of that respective class's resource for more skills to play around with and spam more often, and it's typically a worthy upgrade for both grinding and bossing. I'm not sure the specifics regarding how many points you'd want to put into each, but it's usually worth investing some points into. At some point later on, if you wanted to be extremely min-maxy and top out as much damage as you possibly can through these stats, there's some websites that do just that. Namely, as of the time making this video, Suckcard's Legion Calculator. Or, I guess nowadays they go by MathBro. Anyways, you'll need to input a bunch of your character's various stats for it to be accurate, but it optimizes the absolute most damage you could get out of hyperstats. Most of the time it's minimal increases around like 2 to 10%, but that does add up a ton the further you progress in levels and bosses. I'll also briefly mention Black Mage in specific, because he has so much arcane power requirement that you actually get a damage bump both from reaching 285, or 280 on Reg server, and maxing out arcane power on your hyperstats. Even still, that's not enough to reach his damage cap. I don't think anyone on Earth can build up enough arcane power currently to cap out 1.5 times damage on him. You'd need 1,980, and with maxed out symbols, and the maxed out hyperstat, and the guild skill that gives 30 arcane power, that all only adds up to 1,450. We all still have a long way to go regarding that. Oh, some events also let you increase your arcane power, so that's another source, though it fluctuates as to how much is available per event. So if you wanted to sweat out Black Mage, it might be handy to keep all this in mind, so you're slapping him with as much damage as you possibly can. 5th job skills across all classes ain't no way in hell I'm gonna go over in a satisfying enough way. But I'll still try to give a general idea. Some classes change wildly at 5th, essentially recreating their entire playstyle, while others get some passives with their main attacking skills, or typically some kind of big burst skill of sorts. Also some mini burst and off burst skills sometimes, usually hovering around cooldowns anywhere from 1 to 2 minutes. Some poor saps like me have almost nothing but 5th job skills with 3-minute cooldowns. Shared skills are called this for a reason. Every class gets 2 different types, one for whichever class type you are, and one for whichever character type you are, like Flora, Nova, Anima, Explorer, Sengoku, etc. Some classes don't share character types with others, like Kinesis or Zero. In this case, they just get some extra skills unique to them, or just instead get some overlapping skills with typically Explorers or Grandis type classes. With all that said, here are the shared class skills. All warriors get Weapon Aura and Impenetrable Skin, mages get Mana Overload in Ethereal form, archers get Vicious Shot and Guided Arrow, thieves get Last Resort and Venom Burst, the absolute worst node in the entire game, and pirates get Overdrive and Loaded Dice. Up next is shared class type skills. Everybody gets a Goddess Blessing of some sort, and then one kind of utility skill. Anima gets this one that gives them an extra life when they die, with around a half-hour cooldown. Heroes get Freud's Wisdom, which is a big ol' stacking buff that ends with the 6th stack giving a 30-second iframe, plus all previous stack stats. Flora gets Conversion Overdrive, Resistance gets Resistance Infantry, Nova gets Might of the Nova, Sengoku gets Sengoku Force Assemble, Demons get Defender of the Demon, Cygnus Knights, including Mihail, get Phalanx Charge, and Explorers get a skill per class type that gets shared around. Thieves get Shadow Walker, Warriors get Blitz Shield, Mages get Unreliable Memory, Archers get Fury of the Wild, and Pirates get Pirate's Banner. Now for the remainder classes that don't share class types. Zero gets Transcendent and Transcendent Rin's Prayer, Kinesis gets Afterimage of the Otherworld, Lin gets Power of Destiny Journey, and Xenons are unique in that they get 6 different shared skills. All the Resistance shared skills, all the Thief shared skills, and also all of the Pirate shared skills. Pretty cool. Lastly, nodes everyone gets. All the decent skills, some of which are passive now like Speed Infusion and Advanced Blessing, Urda nodes such as Shower/Fountain, Nova, and Will, Rope Lift and Blink, and then Will and Saren's respective skills you get from them as boss drops. Will's node you initially get after clearing the Asphera questline, but Saren's you gotta defeat Hard Saren to even unlock. 6th job is pretty straightforward for everyone for the most part. Everybody starts off with getting an origin skill after they job advance. Click it and you're invincible for its whole animation, you bind the boss from a cooldown separate from the normal boss bind cooldown timer, and just do a whole load of damage. 6-minute cooldown for all of them. You also get enhanced versions of your 5th job skills that pretty much only up the damage of them for almost every class. Some get extra things like duration and whatnot, but most of the time it's just extra damage. Everybody also gets enhanced attacking skills, with these ranging from any of the ones said class typically uses often, like your bossing and mobbing skills, and also sometimes maybe summons for classes that use those regularly. Sometimes they also toss in a brand new skill, usually a passive tacked onto your other ones, that serves as extra damage every few seconds or so. Lastly, Soul Janus is purely for grinding. You can't use it in boss maps, but in non-boss maps, it can attack bosses. But anyways, there's 2 sides to Janus. Dawn is essentially just Urda Fountain, being able to be placed at a location and attack occasionally. The higher the level of Janus, the more orbs you can place down, up to a maximum of 3 every minute. Dusk just attacks nearby enemies after you attack, raining down on enemies all around you every 3 seconds. Now I know some of that may seem complicated, and you may be wondering how to make your class easier. Well, I can't sum up every class all that easily, but I will try to give some general tips that can help all classes. So let's try and make everyone easy. When doing quests of any sort, and you're mashing through dialogue, Put NPC chat on the Y button to mash through said dialogue faster. Clicking Y on the yes/no prompt boxes makes it so you always select yes whenever the option gives you the choice, and that usually advances the dialogue and accepts its quests at the same time. Not all the time, but most of the time. Speaking of holding down buttons, hold down enter to mash through certain enhancement menus, such as rolling cubes or flames. Nobody wants to sit through all that dialogue and click enter every time a box pops up, or even worse, manually click OK or cancel. Ugh. This also works for pretty much all shops too. If you're a class that benefits from using your skills every time they come off cooldown, it might be a swell idea to add those skills to the alerts/alarms/note/whatever the hell it's called section to the right of your skills to be notified every time they become available again. For grinding, you'll either be the type of class that jumps around the map spamming mobbing skills, the type of class that stands dead center and uses a couple skills back and forth, or the type of class that just places summons everywhere and goes to take a nap while their summons clear everything out for them. With Urda Fountain and Soul Janus Dawn at 260, that's an easier possibility for everyone, no matter your class type. Alright, there's also those types of classes that hold 1 or 2 buttons down and farm with little to no effort, but we can't talk about them. How you doing, Demon Slayer and Nightwalker? What's up? For bossing, try and familiarize yourself with the mechanics of said boss above all else. Same with familiarizing yourself with your skills and how they function depending on their animation, start and or end lag, whether they can be used in the air or only on the ground, their cooldown lengths, etc. If you become comfortable playing around with certain classes, your damage will just come second nature. More so if you recognize a boss's animations as to what they're about to whip out at you next. If you're bossing with a party, share your party buffs around. If you're all at 6th job, try and rotate around not only your binds on the 90-second global cooldown timer, but also your origin on its 90-second global cooldown timer as well. If you needed it, of course. Could always just ignore the boss and nuke them to oblivion with multiple origins. Last but certainly not least, supporting your party when you can helps a lot too. Like Bishop's heals through the skill heal, or their fountain, which everyone gets as a decent node now. Or Lynn with her support's getting nerfed real soon too. In all seriousness, there's still a bunch of support type skills left in Maple. Mainly more so for defense through classes like Paladin and Mihail, or through various party damage boosting buffs like Bishop's Benediction or Pathfinder's Obsidian Barrier. Cooldown hats are something a whole bunch of classes want because it can reduce the cooldown of some of your shorter cooldown skills and let you spam them more often for both grinding and bossing. Typically most classes that use one will want at the very least a -2 second hat plus whatever their main stat is, while some other classes want as much as they can get, which goes all the way up to the ungodly, nearly impossible, pie in the sky, triple prime dream of -6. Not all classes benefit from having as much cooldown as they can possibly get though. Some only want up to a certain point just because it tapers off and becomes inefficient, or worse than a normal lesser cooldown hat with stats. Some others just get their whole rotations messed up from too much too. If you're a class with a bunch of shorter cooldowns you spam frequently for everything, it's generally a safe assumption that you'd want a cooldown hat, but yeah, look around and check up before you invest billions into one. Let's go over secondaries in general. The best in slot secondary for most classes would be from Princess No's squares she drops after defeating her. You need 15 of them, and then you trade them in for whichever class you're playing on. It's most of the time not even a huge upgrade over other secondaries, but it does get edged out ever so slightly with some more attack. There are some classes that don't want Princess No's secondary though, so let's go over those briefly. There's a handful of warriors that can use shields, but for the most part, none of them want to use one. Not even Paladin. Isn't that silly? The only use case you'd ever want to use a shield on warriors for is if you have a Terminus Defender on a hero or Paladin for extremely minimal increases. Getting one to ever drop regardless if you're in Heroic or Interactive is purely ungodly. Good luck with that. I don't think there's ever been one confirmed to have ever dropped in Heroic to this very day. But apparently they are in the game, so who knows. If you did want to farm one out though, go do Ninja Castle 3 times a day and hope one drops. Next, Angelic Buster and Kaiser would want the Evolving Lab secondary, which you can buy from Neville's secondary shop for 100 mil mesos. Theirs are a special kind of weird case, because their Princess No secondaries don't give them attack, while the Evo Lab ones do. Mihail too, actually. Dual Blade in particular gets a ton of Katara options, but their absolute best one is Sweetwater Katara, because it just naturally gives 30% boss and 10% IED. To get the most out of it stat-wise, you'll have to transpose a Fafnir Katara from Root Abyss onto it though. I'm pretty sure you transpose it at 16 stars, like most other transposed gear. It's insanely good, especially since no other Katara they have comes close to giving those kinds of stats. Not even Absolab or Arcane Kataras count towards the respective set bonuses, nor give boss or IED. I don't get why. Moving on, Demon Avenger and Slayer want Ruined Force Shield from any difficulty of Damien, because it gives 10% final damage, but comes at the cost of taking 25% more damage from everything, including percent max health attacks. The Princess No Shield is still good for both, because for Avenger it gives a bunch more health, and for Slayer it gives more Demon Force, but endgame, you'll want Ruined Force Shield. Lastly, most mage classes use shields for everything. There's a handful of mages that can't, like Kinesis, but for those that do use shields, get your smithing profession up to about level 8, farm out a Deimos Sage Shield recipe either from fighting Cygnus or grinding it out from these mobs, and craft one of those. It's the current best mage shield, can be star forced up to 20 times, and just gives some pretty good stats. It also looks pretty cool. One more thing, if you do plan to get it up to 20 stars, remember to make some backup shields, just in case you boom it. Link skills for every class are not the same, but you already know by now that they are the same for most classes. For grinding, there's a typical layout that works for everyone, which is very simply Evan, Mercedes, Aran, and Lara, with the gaps filled in by any other damage dealing links you have or feel like using. Those first three would be for longer rune duration, flat XP, and extra combo orb XP. Lara is there just for more normal enemy damage. Those first three would be for oh, I just read that, yeah. Your goal is to get close to a setup that one-shots enemies, while getting as much XP as you can, so honestly, anything goes. If you're a class that moves around a lot, tossing on Ilium's Tide of Battle could help for more damage, and I personally like Ho-Young's Link, Bravado, to do more damage against full health enemies. Some layout like this is good. For bossing, you generally want the boss damage and damage increasing links, which would be Demon Avenger and Slayer, Kana, and Lin. If you wanted or needed more IED, Luminous's Link is nice. If your crit rate is at 100%, then Kinesis's Link is also nice. And if you're not at 100% crit rate, work on getting that first. Things like Phantom and Explorer Archer's links help with that. If you're any type of archer, you'll still want to go over the crit rate cap of 100% for more damage when you use Vicious Shot. Explorer Mage, Explorer Thief, and Kadina's links all synergize fairly well with each other. Mage gives a debuff on enemies that increases your damage and IED per stack, and both Thief and Kadina do extra damage against debuffed enemies. Lastly, the most important link for everyone nowadays, typically used during Mini Burst and Big Burst, AB's link, Terms and Conditions. It's just a pure damage buff that you manually activate. It can even get extended with extra buff duration, as well as be cooldown skipped, and just gives you a bunch of damage while it's active. Typically it has a 1-minute cooldown. A layout like this is generally good, but set it up however you see fit for your class. And resistance link for 8 seconds of invincibility every time you revive in a boss fight. Inner ability is extremely varied per class type, but let me try to give a general good overview. First, the easiest to sum up. For a grinding setup for nearly every single class, you'd want drop, meso, and normal monster damage. If you plan to grind more and want to make a ton of money, then get first line meso. If you plan to boss more and or want to grind and get more fragments or something, then get drop first line. Next, bossing typically for the second and third lines, you'd usually want any mix of abnormal status damage, boss damage, or buff duration for classes that benefit from that. Flat attack is usually a fine settle too, same with crit rate if you're either a class that doesn't hit 100% crit rate easily, or an archer wanting more crit rate purely to be used during Vicious Shot. First line is generally a toss-up between passives +1, attack speed +1, boss damage, or cooldown skip. Attack speed +1 is the safest bet across all classes to get ever closer towards that cap of 10 attack speed, also commonly abbreviated as AS0. It's not always the surefire best choice, but generally it's a pretty safe bet amongst classes. If you're a class that benefits from your pre-5th job skills resetting often so you can spam big damage skills way more often, then cooldown skip is probably a lot better for you. Passives +1 is a more niche one, but it boosts a bunch of your skills for certain classes, like Ho-Young and Lara's entire 4th job, boosting all their passives that also increase their main attack's overall damage for just about everything. This stacks with decent combat orders too, so hey, even more damage from everything. Lastly, boss damage is just good to have in general, either as a settle, or for classes that are way better at bossing, and benefit from as much boss damage as they can get, like Nightlord. For Trinodes for every class, the first one is usually focused on your skills you'll be spamming most often. This will usually consist of your main mobbing and bossing attacks, sometimes your summons or toggles, or even on rare occasions your passives. That, and whichever ones get boosted at 6th job for your class. You'd still want some others to get boosted, just in case they're like passives or toggles that don't get boosted with 6th job equivalents. But yeah, most of the time just going off of what gets boosted at 6th is the best gauge as to what to get for Trinodes for your class. Some classes use way more Trinodes than others, like Ho-Young boosting literally every single skill they get. It varies depending on what you use and how often, and also how much it boosts your overall DPS and DPM throughout bosses. With the new recent V-Matrix additions that let you craft perfect Trinodes, it should make getting these Trinode setups much easier and breezier too. For Burst/BA, shorten down, toggles, buffs, decent skills, place down summons, use your debuffs, pop any remaining 5th job skills you may have lying around, pop AB link, hold down any big hold down skills, pop your main bursty skills, spam bossing skills until you're off burst. At 6th job, you'll want to slot in your origin generally right after you pop AB link, and then just go to town on the boss for however much longer you have. If you're on binding duties in your party, you'll want to bind after you buff up, get your summons out, and once you've debuffed the boss. For your mini burst, just cycle around that 1-minute cooldown buff you have alongside AB link, and for your off burst, spam your main bossing attack along with your shorter cooldown attacks if you have them. There, that wasn't so bad, was it? Overall, every class in Maple has their ups and downs, but generally if you like how something plays, just play it, have fun with it. MapleStory's a video game after all. Whoops. I wouldn't focus too heavily on playing what is strongest in the moment, because that's a very quick way to burn out on this game if you keep playing things you may not enjoy the playstyle of, all in the pursuit of temporarily doing a bunch of damage in the moment. But hey, if you like playing like that, and you find it fun, I won't stop you, go for it. I was initially just going to make this video a joke guide the whole way through, making fun of every class and such. But the more I thought of things to add to the video, the more I realized I can make a half-and-half video with some actually useful information that's just a general guideline for players that want an overview of what to do with every class they want to play. Thanks to all the various class discords I reside in for not kicking me into the dirt for lurking around and looking at their guides, occasionally asking questions for clarification and such, and thank you for watching this guide. If there's other classes you want me to go over more in detail in the future, give me some suggestions down in the comments. If you just like these videos and want to hear my voice talk about Maple things, or just like these videos for literally whatever reason, consider subscribing to the channel. I still got a bunch more classes I want to make legitimate guides for, so I'll just go back to that. I got a pretty good idea of what class I want to cover next. That's all.